This month we're going to be talking about the exchange. Every week we're going to be talking about a different exchange. And the word exchange means an act of giving one thing and receiving another in return. I gave Christ my old life and He gave me a new life. I exchanged my old life for a new life. And today we're going to be talking about the exchange of an old character for a new character. An old order of things for a new order of things. My friend Mark Dean came to Howard Payne. I met him there. I had just finished my term as freshman class president. When he came in, he was running for freshman class president, and so we became friends. At that time, I had not quite learned to read yet, so I was still a Democrat. And he was a Republican, and so we would have great debates. I mean, great debates. And sometimes they would get heated. But you know what? When we got through talking, we were friends. And that's the way it should be. You know, guys, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, none of that matters. Have your disagreements, but be friends. Be sweet. Hold that candy. Just be sweet as you talk to each other over these next 2 years. I asked Mark to come and share his testimony. When I met Mark, I didn't know much about him except he was running for class president, and later he joined our fraternity, and so we became really good friends. And I asked him last night when we were having dinner, or after dinner, why he thought God brought him to Howard Payne, because he didn't stay but 1 year. And then he went to the University of Denver where he got his pre-law degree. And he said, you know what, I think I had to see a different side of life than what I had seen all of my life. And to be surrounded by a group of genuine Christians so I could see what that was like, because he was not a Christian at that time. And but he and I stayed friends all these years. Very few people you stay friends with for that many years. And he and Musetta, I'm going to embarrass you. Would you stand and let them see? It'll make him look smarter when they see you. Okay, so this is Musetta Dean. I always kidded him. I always said from college, "You're going to marry a black lady, aren't you? I can just tell. I just know you." So when he calls me to say, "I'm going to get married," I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Musetta." I said, "I told you. I knew it. I knew it." No. They have 2 daughters, Jennifer and Hannah, and they have 2 grandkids, one by each. They had kids like a month apart or 2 months apart, something like that. And he's raised a good family, and they all serve the Lord on a regular basis. I asked Mark to come share his testimony with us today and talk about the exchange. So, Mark, I'm going to give you this pulpit. I don't do that very often to very many people, but I'm going to trust you with it. All right? God bless.
I think it did. How y'all doing? I would like to thank a couple people. Olin, Tommy's right. If you lose this gig, you could be a tour guide for Fort Worth. We've been everywhere in the stockyards you can go. I've seen where he went to school. I've seen where he did this. I've seen an old Assembly of God church that your mom used to go to. We played pinball in some place last night that I don't even know where we were, but it probably wasn't a good neighborhood. Probably shouldn't have been there, and definitely without the pastor. I know we shouldn't have been there. But if you ever lose this gig, you'll be a good tour guide. So thank you for showing me Fort Worth. And Tommy, I'm not exactly sure this morning because when I take my glasses off, I really am Mr. Magoo. And so I'm not sure if I used body wash or conditioner this morning. But I smell good. I'm not sure I'm clean, but I smell good. Usually when I'm in church, or I've done a lot of prison ministry. I did 20 years of youth offender ministry. Saw about 2,000 kids in 20 years get saved out of the cartel, drug trafficking. Some of them as little as 11 years old. Our culture has a real problem. In case you haven't noticed it, it's this thing called sin. Of course, we have the cure. We're the only people that have the cure. And I don't know if you know this about sin. It's exactly like cancer. About 20 years ago, they figured out that everybody in this room has cancer in your body. Now, we were born with original sin, and as long as that sin doesn't metastasize into addiction and other things, we walk around acting like we're normal. Cancer's the same way. The interesting thing is in our culture, and I used to tell this to all the kids that I worked with for 20 years, if I offered you the cure for cancer, other than the one kid told me he wouldn't get a shot, so he'd go ahead and die from cancer because he wouldn't get a shot. Everybody else for 20 years said they would take the cure. The sad thing is for the church, they don't want the cure for sin. And the sad thing is and the place I'm coming to now is 31 years. I've been serving the Lord now 1 year longer than I served the devil. And when you hear my testimony, you'll realize I really did serve the devil. I mean that in the most sincerest form. I'm not trying to offend your sensitivities, but I was not a good guy when I lived and grew up in Dallas. I was born in the oil and gas business. I was born in Billings, Montana. 1962, I moved to Arlington, Texas. There was about 5,000 people there and all dirt roads when I moved there in 1962. We lived out behind Six Flags. And some of you that are my age or older know there was a boomerang there. There was a helicopter there. They actually had real gunfights, or fake gunfights, whatever you want to call it. And it was a whole different park, I realize, than it is now. I haven't been there in 30 years. But as a kid, and now that's your parking lot. Where I lived is your parking lot for the football stadium. So, because I was there right when they were trying to buy all the land for that. And after 2 years in Arlington, my dad transferred to North Dallas. I grew up in North Dallas. I went to Hillcrest. At that time, it said Get High School, which was true in the 70s. I would have graduated in 1976, but my dad decided, after not moving for 2 years because my brother would have been in trauma, he waited till I was a senior and moved me to Denver in my senior year. Put me in trauma. So it's probably how I ended up at Howard Payne. I've known Olin for 43 years, 1976 summer. I actually turned 18 the first few days I was at Howard Payne. I had to go down early because I was actually on a golf scholarship. So, and here's what's interesting. Some of you that are from Runaway Bay, they did a promotional thing when they were going to open this up. My dad, as a kid, brought us over here from North Dallas, so whatever year that was. It's probably 69, 70, 71, something in there. So this is the last time I was here, was back then. I never made it over this far west from Dallas. As some of you remember, back in the 70s, the drinking age, it may still be, is 18. Is it 21 now? Is it 21 now, the drinking age? When I was a kid, it was 18. So what that meant was we all had fake IDs, and I started drinking when I was 12. So it didn't really, it didn't matter. I mean, clubs were just indoors. You went there to meet women. And so all my friends started drinking and going to clubs when they were about 16, 17 years old. And a lot of them started working in clubs with fake IDs when they were 17 and 18 years old. If you guys know where Greenville Avenue is? You guys know where all that is? Well, I don't know who owns it now, but it used to be the bomb. So a lot of the places that you work for, if you really figured it out, and it didn't take us that long to figure out who we were working for, there was kind of two lifestyles. You know, there was the rich and famous in North Dallas, and then there was the underworld. And so as I look back on it, I was telling this to Olin the other night, what I really was addicted, unlike a lot of people, I was addicted to power. And maybe that's why I worked for Ronald Reagan, maybe that's why I worked for a U.S. Senator, maybe that's why my friends in the other side of the world were in the mob. I love power. I love people. If you drove by in a car and told me, you see that building there? A year from now, they're going to tear that building down and we're going to build a casino there. Now, a lot of people would say that and you just say, well, he's been drinking too much. The people that I hung out with a year later, they tore the building down and they put a casino there. That was the kind of people that I like to hang out with. Unfortunately, the home that I grew up in was very violent. We didn't know it back then. My father, J.R. Dean, and yes, he was the original J.R. long before the TV show. My mom met him in the 50s and early 50s and married him. And she said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Julius Ray Dean." She goes, "Oh, no, I'm not calling anybody Julius. You're J.R." So in the 50s, he changed his name legally to J.R. And he did work for H.L. Hunt. He worked for literally everybody. He was working for Schlumberger when we got transferred down here. I had a disease called leg perthase in 1960 that they figured out through my case was congenital. At that time, they thought it was a disease you picked up 3, 4, 5 years old, and you were crippled by the time you were 8 or 9. It's where your hip socket deteriorates. And so my dad actually moved down to Arlington because there was a doctor, Dr. Lixman. You told me they named a street after him. He treated me as an experiment and actually cured me perfectly. And then they used the treatment that they used on me to treat and get rid of a lot of people that had that disease, mostly to detect. If you go in and your baby's born, they do that hip socket test. That was because of me in 1960. They realized that kids were born with leg prothese. It was congenital. So that's how we ended up down in this part of the world. But the problem was, once we moved to North Dallas and my dad got into the lifestyle of North Dallas, we didn't know he was bipolar, which, by the way, I am. Along those lines, I've not been hospitalized in 27 years. Last time I got sick was 27 years ago. Most people that are bipolar, if you know anything about it, they get off kilter about every year or two and have an episode. God so saved me and delivered me that I haven't been sick after the second time I went to the hospital. So, yes, I believe in healing. I believe God used doctors to heal people too. So He's done both for me. But the main thing is as I grew up, I became to be wounded because when my dad would go out in the field for long periods of time, he would drink on his way coming back. That was kind of legal back then. It was stupid if you think about it, but you know, he'd leave 2 hours away and drink all the way home. Unfortunately, he was violent when he drank. So when he came home, we had 4 boys. The 2 older boys, Mike, my brother who passed away when he was 48, we were kind of his relief valve. I'll just put it that way. And it was very violent, and I grew up that way. And the interesting thing about that and addiction is probably why God called me into working with youth offenders who were addicts, even though I was not a cokehead or a crackhead or any of the addictions they were, is because I grew up and became a world-class punk. You know what that means? Punks are mad all the time. Somebody's at fault. Somebody did this to me. You know, you've met them, right? I can spot them before they walk in the door. I coached football for 15 years, and this guy that was a professional football player, and then he coached in the World Football League, he asked me to help him one year. And so we walked out on the field. There's 45 kids out there. And I told him, I said, I'll take that kid, and that kid. He said, you just chose the worst kids on the team. I said, I knew who they were the second I got out of my car. I know how they walk. I know how they talk because I was one. Do you understand? So by the time I met Olin, I thought Olin was normal. Now, everybody else there thought he was arrogant. I thought you weren't cocky enough. I always told people, Olin told people he was going to be president. I knew when I ran for president, I would be president. That's how much more arrogant I was than Olin. So we were a perfect fit. It's pretty interesting, though. I kept wondering why Olin didn't want anybody to know who I was. It's like, why don't you want me to know we're friends? Well, I found out there were people that didn't like Olin at the school later. And so it actually was good that for a while people didn't know we were friends. But we've stayed all that time because what Olin's watched, he's talking about the exchange, is what he's watched in my life is for 29 years, I pursued everything I wanted to pursue. I was offered a job to work for the Reagan administration after working in his campaign in 1980 and 84 with the people, the national campaign, with the people in the room that made all the decisions of how to do that. I then worked for a senator. He offered me to be his aide. Would have subverted my political or legal career. And so I was very achieved, but I was also very dark. Does it make sense? I could go to church on Sunday and I could be out with the guys on Friday getting in trouble. Does it make sense? I'm sure it doesn't sound like anything that's going on now. Like the world. I'm sure it's not like any of that. Only thing that's sad is what we've done with all of our vices now is we've made them somehow, well, he's just got his issue or she's got her issue. Not really. Because see what happened is, and where God takes us to, and I'll share with you, fortunately, when I met Musetta in 1982, I moved next door to a professional football player. A lot of you guys wouldn't know it looking at me, but my spiritual father is black. Isn't that right? Mike Spivey. Mike Spivey came from Houston. That's the only really thing I have against him. I don't care that he's black because he's smarter than me. He's got about 90% of the Bible memorized, and he reads all the time. And anyway, he's smarter than me. But he was so powerful. Mike ran a 4.240. He bench pressed 550 pounds. Okay? He used to fight 5 or 6 of his teammates, starting offensive or defensive linemen, and knock them all out in under 60 seconds. That's what Mike was before he got saved. And so God took a strong, bad situation with my father, ugly, violent, that I had to... One of the reasons that Olin doesn't even know this about me. One of the reasons I quit lifting weights after I quit playing sports is from the time I was a kid and my dad would come home and beat me up, I resolved in my mind I would get so strong that I would stop him someday. I would be so powerful I would stop him. And that happened when I turned 17 years old. I built myself up, and he was a 6'3" man, very strong, very tough country boy. But I was so powerful, I had a 44-inch chest, a 28-inch waist, could bench press 2.5 times my body weight. I was powerful. I swam 16,000 yards a day training to go to the Olympics. I could literally snap his neck if I wanted to with my body, and he knew it by the time I was 17 years old. He raised me like a snake, and I became a snake, but I became more powerful to stop him. The problem was I was not under control. You know that word meek in the Bible? That's power under control. I had no control. I spoke like Richard Pryor unless I got in public or went to Howard Payne and went to a Christian school. I could put on clothes. I did put on a suit, or close to a suit for you guys, because my buddy likes to wear suits, and I want to be respectful of who you guys are. But what you need to know is when I grew up, I wasn't any of those things. I was arrogant, cocky. It was perfect for the political world, if you think about it. I mean, to be cocky and smart and bright and everything, it sets you up great for a political career. It's true. If you've ever met some of these guys, I got to tell you, they're not who they put themselves out to be a lot of times. And but in 1982, he moved me next door to a guy that was 2 days away from going playing for Bum Phillips and Wade Phillips at New Orleans. And this guy that was so powerful, so strong, scary. I mean, it was literally scary to sit next to somebody that powerful that was 6'1" and had all that power in that body and was as fast as the 4x4 100 guys in the Olympics. It was scary to see somebody that powerful, but I loved it. And so Mike would come to our parties. We said, I can tell you this, that I would have 100 people in my house, and it would be all levels of decadence going on. And Mike would just sit there and he'd go, if you ever want to know anything about the real Jesus, just let me know. And I thought, hey, I've walked an aisle. I used to go to John Pisanio's church. I've walked down an aisle. I've prayed a prayer. He said, no, if you ever want to know the real Jesus, just come see me. So we got married. Miseta and I moved away from Mike's house where we were next door. And for about 5 years, I got to the place where finally I needed to do something with my life. I had a daughter, our daughter Jennifer. She's 33 years old now. She was born. So we started going to a Baptist church. And I was trying to clean my act up. Does anybody know what that's like? Was it just me? I was trying to clean my act up. I thought going to church will clean me up, because this is going to be hard to imagine, but I was really getting sick and tired of who I was. The exchange really was. It started with the fact that I was disgusted pretty much with what I was. Here I was, very successful, doing well in the oil and gas business, making a lot of money. I knew everybody. I could raise millions of dollars to do what I wanted to do. But I had no peace. When I went to bed at night, I really didn't sleep. For years, I didn't really sleep. And so what happened the morning that I got saved was I was trying to get back around my family. And after I started going to church, it became more and more difficult for me to be around my family. They were not into that. And we were always going at each other. And I remember, I didn't know it at the time, it was the Holy Spirit. God kept trying to tell me that, I want to help you. I want to change you. I want to make you different. I liked being a punk, but I was getting tired of the side effects of being a punk. And the crowd had thinned out, shall we say, from when I was younger. And so I woke up one morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, and for about a minute and a half, I used to be a competitive swimmer, so I could hold my breath that long. I couldn't breathe. He said, it's over. This is the old phones, trying to dial 911, because I clearly couldn't breathe. What had happened is my lungs had filled with fluid, And when your lungs fill with fluid, you just can't, until you do something to clear your chest, it feels like you can't take a breath. And I didn't know that. But it was actually God that was doing it. The second, right before I caught my breath, God said, I'm going to show you something today. I was starting to think I was pretty good. I wasn't cussing much out loud around people. And when I went in public, I wasn't offending people regularly, something that I did everywhere I went. And it's horrible. I left a bad trail. And yet, I hadn't yielded yet to what God wanted to do. So that particular morning that he stopped me from breathing, and he said, I'm going to show you something today. I had to be around my family all day long. And so what happened was I was good for about 3 hours. And then they started, as brothers would do, going at each other. And it got really ugly. So I picked up a pickaxe and got him to back up a little. And got in my car and left. And the whole way home, God kept saying, I want to make that exchange. I want to help you. And finally, after about 20 minutes of the 30-minute drive home, I realized now I was fighting with God, wrestling Jacob. I'm fighting with God. It's in my mind that I'm literally having an out loud fight with him. And he basically said, Mark, you need me. And this is how I had become exactly like my dad at that point. I loved my dad, but I hated my dad, and I'd become my dad. Was that I was empty. And he said, I want to save you. I want to change you. And I'm like, I don't need anything. We're getting ready to our Mississippi Avenue Baptist Church. We're going to the state playoffs that night. I kept telling him, I'm going home. I'm taking a shower. I'm going to get cleaned up. I'm going to go put on my uniform. I'm going to go out and stretch, maybe work out a little bit. And a couple hours later, I'm going to get something to eat and go to the ball game. So I'm telling God as I'm fighting with him what I'm going to do. How arrogant of me. And I get upstairs in our townhouse, and I get in the shower, and he said, Mark, you don't understand. You need me. And I'm like, I don't need anything. That very second, something, I know who it was, knocked me down on the floor. I was down on the floor. You said to know she walked in. I was down on the floor, flat on my face. From being beaten up when I was younger, I had learned for 20 years how not to cry. I had not cried in 20 years. By the way, that's not healthy if you're like that. I don't suggest that. It's not a good treatment. You should cry. There are things you should cry about. But I had lost that ability. And I'm laying on my face, flat on my face, still fighting with God. He's like, Mark, you need me. And we're fighting back and forth. It was vicious. I don't know if it was a second. I don't know if it was an hour. I don't know if it was a day. But the only verse Mike had shared with me in 5 years was, see, today I set before you life and death, blessing, cursing. Now choose life. God spun that verse in my head, literally like if we turn these speakers up 10 times louder than we did. And honestly, guys, I'll just be quite honest with you. At that point, to me, it was either say uncle or die. It really was that clear to me. And as I'm still fighting with God, I went to take a breath, and just like 2 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't breathe. And you know what? God can wait longer than you. I learned that when I'm on the floor. So Vicente walks in with my 2-year-old girl, Jennifer, and they're watching their dad cry, his face. And the second that I said, Uncle, okay, Lord, it's yours. You can take it. It's all yours. This bolt of lightning literally went through my body. So much so that it took me 30 minutes to get up, get on the bed, and stretch out, another hour laying down. And it took a long time. People thought when I went to that baseball game that night, they thought I was high. I understand why they thought I was high, because of the way I was acting. And I got set free. Since that time, okay, a lot of things have changed. But the one thing that hasn't changed is every single day I get down once or twice in my house before I have a quiet time for 30 minutes to an hour and a half. Just me and the Lord down in the kitchen. Asking God, what is it you want me to do today? How do you want me to do tomorrow? What do you want me to do a year from now? What do you want me to do today? Because, see, here's the thing. You need to keep real short accounts with God on what you think you want to do. Does anybody get that? Jonah, remember he didn't want to do it? And a whale came along and took care of that for him. I will tell you that why I like going to people that are messed up in prison. I'm actually working on a film now about a guy named Richard Koss. Some of you may have ever heard or come across Richard Koss because he spends a lot of time with Southern Baptists when he's not in prison. But he's done prison ministry for 45 years. He has the largest death row ministry in the world. He literally 20 years ago started going to a prison called Angola. And if you guys have ever heard the testimony of Angola, 96% of that prison who will never leave, they're all 85-year minimum sentences. They will die in prison, 95% of them, 6% of them are Christian. It's the safest city in America, voted last year. It's a 5,500 person prison, maximum security. And it's only because the gospel, through Richard Koss and a guy named Burl Cain, went in there and they actually practiced the gospel, grace, forgiveness, salvation, and the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. And these guys are safer than the cities you and I live in. Is that scary? And I'll tell you right now, in case you think you have to worry about what's going on in prison, I can't say all the prisons, because some prisons won't let the gospel in. It's interesting, a friend of mine says they won't let kids have Bibles in schools, but the minute they get locked up for what they learn in school, they'll give them one in prison. And they will. And the great thing is when some of those people get out, it's going to flip the world upside down. Because there's 3 million people in prison. And a big chunk of them, especially where my friend goes, they're on fire, soul winning, living for Jesus. They baptize people all the time in facilities that he goes to. Isn't that cool? And yet we're begging people to come to church. Guys, I'm not sure where you're at. And are we getting close? Are we there? Okay, we're there. I try to hit my time on this. I would say this. My number one prayer is if you don't know Christ and you're struggling, you're wrestling, don't do that anymore. It's not necessary. Please don't have a conversion. I'm so glad my kids didn't wait so long and be so hard-headed like their dad to get saved. It's painful to do that. I trashed a lot of people out. I burned a lot of bridges living the way that I lived. I wasted a lot of people's friendships. Not Olin and I's, but other people's. The other thing I would say is this. When Olin gives the invitation for wherever you're at, I pray for a lot of people. Okay? And I brought, for you guys, High Church. For you guys, I brought a fresh bottle of oil. Okay? The ones that I walk around with, the paper's all rubbed off of them. Because it doesn't take a lot of oil to pray over somebody. But if there's something that you want prayer for today, come on. If there's something you want prayer for today, maybe it's not that you need to be saved. Maybe you got a wayward kid. Maybe you got, I don't know what it is. Maybe you're struggling at work. Maybe you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? I'll stay around. I've only got a 10-hour drive to Denver. It's no big deal. No, I say that sincerely. That's not a long drive. And my wife loved that we drove this time because we've flown the last 20 years. And I will leave you with this because Olin wanted me to hit this. God has blessed me I'm talking about numbers-wise, beyond my ability to count. And I'm talking financially now. Stewardship, are you guys doing stewardship now? When I got saved, I didn't have $200 in the bank because I walked away from a family business. My brother and I now are equal partners in a business that has 300 million barrels of oil to recover in Bakersfield. Is that pretty big? Okay. And I'm saying that because a lot of people think, well, if I'm honorable, and Owen loves my testimony because he saw me giving money when I didn't have any money. I was living in my mother-in-law's basement. I guess that would make me a millennial today. But it was the early 80s. It wasn't popular back then. So I'm not sure where you're at. I'm not sure what's going on in your life. But if you need God to help you with something supernaturally to help you, to fight for you. Let me leave one other thing with you. When I used to pray, the first 20 years I was a Christian, everything was pretty much defensive. You guys know what I mean? I'm fixing to lose my house. God, please save my house. I'm fixing to lose this. Okay. The way you can imagine the guy that led me to the Lord being a fighter like he was. Do you realize everything in here is a weapon to tear down and destroy the enemy's attack on you? Okay. If you want somebody to pray with you like that about something that's going on, I'll be here till this building's empty to pray for you. It doesn't have necessarily to be now, but if you want to come forward, you can do that. And if you need to be saved, if you're wrestling like I was, let go of that. It's not worth it. And the peace of mind that I got from the first day I was a Christian was better than the best day I ever had as a pagan. Hey, thank you guys for letting me come talk to you.
Sit down. Mark, once he found Christ, he had a rough relationship with his family before he found Christ. But after he found Christ, they pretty much tried to hold him hostage with the family business. And when he did walk away from it, he just said, serving the Lord means more to me than all your millions of dollars. I don't need that. And so that's why he ended up living in that basement. And, he had lots of money by that time.
Yep.
Tom and I went up to speak at the church where he was attending, and they weren't doing real well. And I said, Mark, what happened to all the money? He said, it's gone. It's all gone. I got to start over. So he did start over. But here's what happened. That abusive father, when he saw Mark's commitment to the Lord, Mark eventually got to see his father come to Jesus.
And disciple him.
And disciple him. And then, before he died, was he Presbyterian Church?
Lutheran.
Lutheran Church. He, the last year of his life, had that Lutheran church out practicing evangelism explosion. And he was one
knocking on
training.
doors.
And this is the guy that used to beat the doodle dust out of him all the time, leave him bloody and broken. But not just his dad. His mom and his brothers and their families all came to Jesus. Because Jesus meant more to him than the millions of dollars that they were trying to hold him hostage with. But what God did is, because he honored God first, his business now has more money than his daddy's business did that he was trying to hold him hostage with. And he doesn't take any credit for it. He'll tell you, the only reason I have what I have is because it all belongs to God, and he's let me have a part of it. That's the kind of guy that I want to run around with. But money's not the issue. Jesus is the issue. That's who Mark Dean is. And that's why I kept him as my friend, because I knew he had potential.
Yeah, you did.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for sharing this morning.